On a cool Saturday morning, a black federal agent brought his 7-year-old son to the park to enjoy a peaceful day, leaving behind his badge and the burdens of his job. But tension rose when a woman known for her sense of entitlement accused the boy of cutting in line. Without warning, she stormed over and slapped him in front of stunned families. As the park fell silent in shock, the father stepped forward. She had no idea he was an FBI agent. Now, she has to face the consequences. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. Hello friends, if you new here then don't forget to hit subscribe button, and if you like then hit the like button also, and don't forget to tell me in the comments where you from watching this video. It was the kind of Saturday that felt borrowed from another time, calm, bright, with a breeze that hummed gently through the trees lining Washington Green Park. The morning sun warmed the sidewalks without biting, and for once, the chatter of traffic was replaced by the laughter of children, the soft creak of swings, and the rhythm of sneakers over gravel. It was a morning built for memory. MEM, Karen slaps black boy on playground, didn't know his father was a federal agent. Aching. And for Isaiah Brooks and his 7-year-old son, Noah, it was exactly that, a rare day untouched by deadlines or duty. Isaiah, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his late 30s, carried himself with a quiet gravity, someone used to commanding a room, but who now moved with deliberate softness. The tired lines beneath his eyes hinted at long hours and long absences. But today, he wore none of that. No badge, no federal title, just jeans, a hoodie, and a warm paper cup in hand. He had promised Noah that this Saturday would belong entirely to them. No glances at his phone, no unexpected work calls, just swings, sunshine, and his full attention. Noah had taken that promise to heart, launching himself out of the car the second it stopped, racing toward the rocket-shaped jungle gym with a grin that could have lit up the entire block. The park was awake with life but not yet overwhelmed. Parents settled on benches with strollers and snacks. Some kept half an eye on their children while scrolling through their phones. Others knelt in the grass helping little hands climb over plastic obstacles or tie shoelaces that always seemed to come undone. Isaiah picked a bench close enough to keep watch, but far enough to give Noah the independence he craved, his own little kingdom of swings and slides. For a while, it was peaceful. Noah darted from one corner of the park to the next, playing tag with other children, bouncing on spring-loaded animals, and finally making his way toward the swings, his favorite. He waited patiently at the edge, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, his sneakers kicking at gravel while the child before him finished. Isaiah, sitting quietly nearby, sipped his coffee and smiled to himself, watching his son's quiet determination. These were the moments that made everything else, the missed dinners, the late nights, the long absences, almost worth it. But not far from where Noah stood, another presence had begun to stir. Cynthia Haraway, mid-40s, sharply dressed in a way that clashed with the casual tone of the park, was already drawing attention. Her voice carried across the wood-chipped field like a warning. With her platinum blonde hair tightly pinned and oversized sunglasses perched high on her nose, she scolded a younger mother near the slide for letting her child hog the equipment. The confrontation grew quickly. Cynthia's tone was sharp, clipped, unmistakably condescending. The young mother, flustered and soft-spoken, attempted to reason with her, but reason had no place in Cynthia's world. Her arms flailed, words escalated, and soon enough, the woman was retreating with her child in tow, cheeks flushed and jaw clenched. Several parents glanced in her direction, murmuring under their breath but said nothing. Cynthia, known by some in the community as that woman, had a history. She had become a fixture of the park, a storm in heels, unpredictable and loud, the kind of person most chose to avoid rather than confront. And for a moment, it seemed the latest eruption had passed. Noah, now first in line, stepped forward. He gripped the swing chains with excitement, turned to find his father watching, and beamed. Isaiah lifted his coffee in response, the gesture simple, but full of meaning. Then Noah pushed off, little legs pumping, shoes slicing the air as he lifted higher and higher with every swing. The joy was pure. That laugh, the kind that came from deep in a child's chest, rang through the morning air. And then, just as quickly, the stillness cracked. Aiden, Cynthia's son, burst across the playground toward the swings, fixated not on the open ones, but the one Noah was. He stopped in front of it, arms crossed, face scrunched in frustration. "I want that one," he declared. Noah, slowing his swing, replied kindly, "This one's mine." But for Cynthia, watching from a few yards away, that wasn't enough. Gravel crunched beneath her heels as she stormed forward, cutting across the field like a thunderhead. Her voice, already too loud for comfort, sliced through the air. "That's our swing," she snapped, pointing directly at Noah. "He saw us coming and took it anyway." Noah, mid-swing, looked confused, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "I was already waiting," he began, but she wasn't listening. She stepped forward, fast, too fast, closing the space between them. Then, with an open palm and sudden jarring force, she struck him across the face. The sound wasn't loud, but its impact echoed. Noah's head jerked to the side. His grip on the chains faltered. For one suspended moment, everything froze. The swings, the voices, the very air seemed to still. Gasps scattered through the playground. A father stood. A mother reached for her phone. A toddler stopped mid-giggle and looked on in silence. Isaiah was already moving. The coffee cup hit the ground. His shoes ground into gravel as he crossed the space between them in long, determined strides, faster than instinct, faster than rage. But there was no fury in his steps, just precision. And the air, once light, began to shift because this was no longer a Saturday morning in the park. This was the beginning of something else entirely. Noah had waited the way he always did, quietly, respectfully, the way his father had taught him. Hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, sneakers pushing small grooves into the gravel below. He stood beside the swing set, watching with silent excitement as the last child began to slow. Every now and then, he glanced back toward the bench where his father sat. Isaiah gave him a small nod, lifting his coffee slightly as if to say, "I see you, son. Go fly." Noah stepped forward and reached for the swing, gripping the chains with both hands. The corners of his mouth pulled into a quiet, satisfied smile. He was about to climb on when a sharp, impatient voice rang out across the playground. "That's our swing." Heads turned, some subtly, some with concern. She was storming across the playground, dragging her young son, Aiden, behind her, heels crunching over gravel like gunfire. "He saw us coming," she shouted, pointing directly at Noah. He rushed over to take it. He cut in line. Noah froze, hands still on the swing. "I didn't," he said, voice uncertain. "I was waiting." "Oh, don't lie." Cynthia snapped, marching faster now. "You kids think everything belongs to you. That swing was for my son. You saw us and ran just to beat him here. I said he could go next." Noah offered, confused but still trying to be polite, "I didn't mean to." Cynthia didn't even hear him, or if she did, she didn't care. "You don't get to make that decision," she said, her voice rising sharply. "You don't get to take what's not yours and act like you're doing us a favor." She reached Noah, standing just inches from him now. Her body language tense, her breath shallow and quick. "Kids like you don't learn unless someone teaches you how to behave." And then, without warning, she slapped him, an open-handed strike across his cheek. The sound cracked through the air like a whip. Noah's head snapped to the side, and he staggered, one hand slipping from the swing chain. His body froze in place for a split second, long enough for the color to drain from nearby faces. A collective gasp swept through the parents nearby. A baby began to cry. A phone was pulled out. A bottle dropped. Time stuttered. Noah didn't scream. He didn't fall. He just stood there, stunned, the redness on his cheek blooming like fire beneath his brown skin. His lips parted in disbelief, eyes wide and glistening. Isaiah began to rise from the bench, moving with steady purpose before his cup hit the ground. The coffee splashed onto his boots as he crossed the playground in seconds, fast and silent, his expression unreadable but his presence magnetic. The crowd parted instinctively. A current had shifted. Something ancient and dangerous flickered beneath the surface of the man in the hoodie. He dropped beside Noah, crouching low. His large hands, soft as they cupped the boy's jaw. "Hey," he said, his voice trembling despite his control. "You with me? Let me see." Noah looked up at him, eyes full, not just with pain, but confusion. "She hit me," he whispered. Isaiah stood slowly, methodically. Cynthia was still there, arms crossed, a smug sort of certainty radiating from her. "Maybe next time he won't be so rude," she said. Loudly, aiming her voice not just at Isaiah but at the crowd now gathering around them, Cynthia sneered, "You're welcome." A father in the back whispered, "No way." Another pulled out his phone. A woman muttered, "Did she just hit him? Did I just see that?" Isaiah didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast, but when he turned to face her, everything about his posture shifted. His hands were no longer shaking. His shoulders were no longer relaxed. And behind his stillness, there was a heat that hummed like voltage. Cynthia didn't see it, not yet. "Your son saw us," she said again, defending herself. "He cut in front. That's not fair." Isaiah didn't speak, not yet. The tension in the air had shifted from curiosity to dread. Everyone around them sensed it now. This wasn't going to blow over. It wasn't going to be another Karen moment, swept under the wood chips of awkward silence. Something was about to change. Isaiah stood still, not moving, not speaking, just watching Cynthia harrow away with the kind of silence that carried more weight than shouting ever could. His face gave nothing away, but something in the set of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw, made even the air feel heavier. Around them, the park had gone eerily quiet. Parents who had once pretended not to hear now hovered closer, eyes sharp, phones discreetly recording. Cynthia, still defiant, looked back at him with a sneer of performative control. "He needed to be corrected," she said, as if explaining herself to a slow student. "You don't let kids act like that and just smile about it. That's how you raise entitled brats." Isaiah didn't flinch. His voice, when it came, was steady, low, measured, but carrying the unmistakable weight of law behind every syllable. "You assaulted my son," he said, his words clear, unshaken. "In front of multiple witnesses, including me." Cynthia blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Her laugh came out clipped and dry. "Assault? That's dramatic. I didn't punch him. I just gave him a little slap, a correction. People do worse to their dogs. That did it." The crowd stirred. A chorus of disbelief rose like a slow tide. One mother clutched her child's hand tighter. A teenager muttered, "Did she just compare him to a dog?" The quiet around them shifted again. What had started as tension now tipped toward outrage. "I'm a federal agent with the Department of Justice," Isaiah said evenly, reaching into his back pocket and pulling out a black leather badge case. He flipped it open and held it at chest height, the sun glinting off the gold. The moment the badge came into view, Cynthia's expression fractured. The sneer dropped. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't know. I didn't know who you were." "It doesn't matter who I am," Isaiah replied, his voice like steel wrapped in calm. "It matters what you did. You hit a child. My child." It was being disrespectful, she blurted louder now, trying to reclaim her footing. He saw us coming and took the swing on purpose. He looked at me like he thought he was better than us. A voice from behind her cut in, firm, sharp, unmistakably fed up. That's not what happened. A woman stepped forward, one hand on her hip, the other holding a phone, still recording. Your kid never even said a word. That boy was waiting in line. I watched the whole thing. She glanced at Isaiah. I've got it on video. Cynthia turned to her, then to the rest of the gathering crowd, suddenly aware that no one stood with her. Faces she once expected to silently tolerate her were now filled with disgust. Another voice joined in, a man this time, tall, serious. She's done this before. Last month she screamed at my niece for stealing her son's turn on the monkey bars. The week before, she tried to drag a toddler off the sandbox. Nobody did anything because we didn't want to start drama. But this? This is too far. Cynthia's face twisted in disbelief, then panic. You're all just piling on because of him, she said, jabbing a finger toward Isaiah. Because of what he is. Isaiah didn't move. He didn't blink. Say it, he said quietly. She faltered. Someone from the back whispered, she just made it worse. Isaiah turned slightly and pulled out his phone. His voice, clipped but composed, as he spoke into the receiver. It's Brooks. I need a unit dispatched to Washington Green Park. Assault on a minor. Civilian offender. Multiple witnesses and recorded video. Suspect is still on scene. Cynthia's mouth fell open again, her hands starting to flutter. Her voice rising in desperation. This is insane. I'm a mother. I was protecting my son. From what? Isaiah asked, stepping closer now, his presence looming. From a 7-year-old waiting for a swing? Cynthia tried to back away, stumbling slightly over the uneven gravel. You can't do this, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted to make a point. Isaiah didn't follow. He stood his ground. You made your point, he said calmly. And now you'll face the consequences. Another parent moved forward, blocking Cynthia's attempt to retreat. You're not going anywhere, he said quietly. Police are coming. Cynthia turned in circles, looking for an ally, a loophole, an escape. She found none. Her own son stood off to the side, clutching his sleeves, his expression stunned. He didn't move toward her. He didn't speak. If anything, he looked like he wanted to disappear. And then the sound of sirens. They started faint, so faint they could have been imagined. But then they grew louder, unmistakable. Heads turned. Cynthia's face went white. The panic in her eyes turned to something else now, recognition. She had stepped over a line that could not be stepped back from. Isaiah looked down at Noah, who now stood holding his hand again, still quiet, still shaken. The redness on his cheek had deepened, but he was safe. And soon, the woman who had hurt him would no longer be free to do the same to anyone else's child. The patrol cars pulled up fast, tires grinding softly against the curb as the blue and red lights pulsed across the park like a slow-rising tide. The moment the first officer stepped out, the air changed again. Not with fear, but with the strange quiet that follows a storm, the kind of hush that comes when something long overdue is finally happening. Cynthia froze where she stood, back stiff, eyes darting wildly between the badge on Isaiah's chest, the gathering parents, and the uniformed officers approaching with calm, professional focus. One of them, Officer Ramirez, nodded toward Isaiah. "Sir," he said, already reaching for his notebook. "We got the call. You the reporting party?" Isaiah gave a single nod, his tone clipped but steady. "Isaiah Brooks, Federal Agent DOJ. Civilian struck my son, 7 years old, unprovoked. Multiple witnesses, 2 have video evidence. She's still here." He gestured toward Cynthia, who visibly recoiled as the officers turned their attention to her. "I didn't, this is all being twisted," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt him. It was just a misunderstanding." Officer Ramirez didn't flinch. "Ma'am, please step over here," he said firmly, motioning toward a clear patch near the park entrance. "We'll ask you a few questions. You are not under arrest yet, but I strongly advise you cooperate." Cynthia hesitated, lips trembling as though debating whether to run or cry. But neither option would have helped her now. She glanced back once at her son, Aiden, who still hadn't moved, standing halfway behind a trash bin, not speaking, not blinking. His shoulders were hunched, his face pale. He looked smaller than he had 20 minutes ago, and for the first time, there was something like shame in his eyes, not his own, but absorbed from the wreckage unraveling in front of him. Isaiah gently guided Noah back toward the bench where they had sat earlier, crouching beside him again, inspecting the boy's cheek now visibly swollen and faintly bruised. "You did nothing wrong," he said softly, his hand resting on the back of Noah's head. "This is not your fault. Not a single bit of it." Noah nodded, still quiet, still holding tight to his father's hand. Around them, parents who had stood frozen before began to move slowly, cautiously. One woman offered a bottle of water. Another mother bent down beside them, her toddler tucked into her side. "He's brave," she said gently, nodding toward Noah. "So are you," a man nearby added. "That woman's been a problem here for years. You're the first one who's ever stood up to her." Others murmured in agreement, voices low but sincere. Stories started spilling out, little incidents, quiet humiliations, moments where Cynthia's presence had driven families from the playground, screaming at kids, threatening to sue another mom over a scraped knee, swatting a child's hand away from a toy she said her son was still using. "We didn't want trouble," one woman admitted. "But we should have said something sooner." Isaiah didn't look away from his son. "Sometimes, it just takes one voice, one moment." The officers finished reviewing the videos from the two phones offered. From where Isaiah sat, he could hear the audio clearly, Noah's quiet voice saying, "You can go next," followed by Cynthia's sudden slap and her shrill voice afterward. There was no ambiguity, no missing context, only truth laid bare in pixels and sound. Officer Ramirez returned, more solemn now. "We're proceeding with misdemeanor child assault," he said. "We've taken the statements, and we're filing a report with the district attorney today. Her behavior was witnessed and recorded. She's being taken in for processing." Isaiah stood as Cynthia's hands were gently cuffed behind her back. She didn't resist. Her voice, once sharp and certain, now trembled. "You're ruining my life over this," she muttered, glancing sideways at Isaiah as the officers began guiding her toward the squad car. It was a swing. A stupid swing. Isaiah looked down at Noah, then back at her. His voice was calm, unwavering. "You ruined your life the moment you laid a hand on a child." The back door of the patrol car closed with a dull final thud. The siren stayed silent now, no urgency, no rush, just quiet accountability rolling slowly down the park lane. After the cars were gone, the park seemed to exhale. The stiffness broke, replaced by movement, murmurs, empathy. A few parents approached Isaiah, one patting him on the back, another shaking his hand. A mother knelt to give Noah a sticker, which he accepted with a tentative smile. Slowly, color returned to the edges of the day, but the scar of what had happened remained at the center of it all, hanging in the air like a bruise that would take time to fade. A young man with a clipboard approached them next. His city parks uniform tucked neatly into his belt. "Mr. Brooks," he said cautiously, "I'm with Denver Parks and Recreation. We heard what happened." The officers radioed it in. "First, I'm so sorry. Second, we've had reports about her before, but nothing ever formal, nothing anyone was willing to follow through on." He hesitated, glancing around the now active playground. "We're going to fast-track installation of cameras here. We'll also be reviewing park policies, maybe posting signs about conduct and reporting behavior. I just wanted to thank you for what you did." Isaiah nodded once. "It shouldn't take a child getting hit for people to act." "You're right," the man said. "But now, at least it's in motion." Isaiah watched Noah for a moment. His son was now sitting quietly on the bench, holding the sticker in one hand and a juice box in the other, eyes still distant. A swing creaked in the distance, and for the first time, Isaiah wondered whether that sound would now carry something else for the boy, something painful, something that would take time to undo. He made a note to take him somewhere different next time, a new park, a fresh place. But for now, he stayed still, hand on his son's back, letting the afternoon light warm them both as the park settled into the quiet rhythm of healing. The week that followed moved both faster and slower than Isaiah had expected. Faster, in the sense that everything was suddenly in motion: phone calls, paperwork, witness coordination, official statements. Slower, in how the weight of what happened lingered in their home, in Noah's silence, in the way he flinched when a voice rose too loud on the television or hesitated before stepping onto their backyard swing set. Isaiah had seen trauma before, had studied its shapes and scars in the eyes of victims and witnesses, but nothing had prepared him for seeing it in his own son, 7 years old, brave, and already learning how deeply unfair the world could be. The district attorney's office moved quickly. Marcus Riley, the assistant DA Isaiah had worked with on multiple federal and local task force cases, called him directly. "We've reviewed both videos," Marcus said, his voice clipped with a sort of righteous urgency. "It's clean, clear." She walked up and slapped him without cause or hesitation. "We're filing formal charges. Misdemeanor child assault. She's already made the booking log. Initial hearing set for 2. Isaiah didn't ask for anything special. He didn't have to. He trusted Marcus to pursue this by the book. The only request he made, calmly but firmly, was that a restraining order be part of the conditions. He didn't want Cynthia Haraway anywhere near his son or that park ever again. Noah, meanwhile, had returned to school. The teachers were supportive, gentle. The school counselor checked in, but Isaiah could see the difference. His son, normally so open and quick to laugh, had become quieter, more careful. When he asked if he wanted to go back to the park, Noah shook his head. "Not yet," he whispered. "Maybe later." Isaiah didn't push. He knew healing didn't follow schedules. Then the headlines came. Local news outlets picked up the story within days. They kept Noah's name out of it per privacy guidelines, but the phrasing was unmistakable: woman arrested after slapping child at playground. The public didn't realize the father was a federal agent. Social media caught wind. The Reddit threads exploded. The comments poured in: outrage, support, horror, gratitude. People shared their own Karen stories. Parents who had once been too afraid to speak now flooded the city's parks department with complaints, statements, even screen captures of old Facebook rants Cynthia had posted about entitled kids and lazy parents who raised savages. Her reputation unraveled in public, not because of who Isaiah was, but because this time, there was proof. Her lawyer, the type with too many billboards and too few wins, tried to downplay the incident in press comments, claiming she was defending her child, that she acted impulsively out of concern. But the video didn't lie. Her words on camera, "Maybe now he'll understand respect," sounded less like concern and more like control. Marcus reached out again. "They're floating a plea deal," he said. "Community service, anger management, no jail time, but she'd have a record, plus the restraining order. She won't be able to set foot in that park for a year." He paused. "You want to object?" Isaiah thought about it long and hard, and in the end, he shook his head. "No," he said. "Let her plea, just make sure it sticks. I don't want her walking away thinking this was nothing." The day of the hearing, Isaiah sat in the courtroom, not as a federal agent, but as a father. He wore no badge, no suit, just a simple shirt, dark pants, and a presence that filled the bench behind the prosecution table. Cynthia sat across the aisle, composed but deflated. Her lawyer whispered hurriedly. She didn't look at Isaiah. She didn't look at anyone. She looked like someone trying to pretend they weren't part of the story. The judge read the plea terms aloud: 1 year probation, 200 hours of community service, 6 months of court-mandated anger management classes, no contact with Isaiah, Noah, or any park in the Denver City District for 12 months. Isaiah watched her face, no tears, no apology, just a resigned acceptance of consequences. When asked if he wanted to speak, Isaiah stood. His hands didn't shake. His voice didn't waver. He didn't deliver a speech filled with anger or bitterness. He spoke clearly, calmly, with the quiet fire of someone who had lived his whole life knowing what it meant to be seen as less. He described what happened at the park, not just the slap, but the silence that followed, the crowd that finally stood up, the people who had carried truth forward when it mattered. This wasn't about a swing, he said, steady. This was about power, about control, about someone thinking they had the right to lay hands on a child who didn't fit their mold of what a child should be. My son was polite, patient. Still, he was punished for standing in a space that someone else didn't think he deserved. I hope this courtroom sends a message, not just to her, but to anyone watching. You don't get to harm children, physically, emotionally, and walk away clean. Not anymore. He sat down. The judge accepted the plea and dismissed the court. Cynthia left without speaking, her eyes low. Isaiah didn't follow her gaze. He had said what needed to be said, for Noah, for every kid who'd ever been pushed out of a space that should have belonged to them. Weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning, Noah tugged gently at his father's sleeve. "Can we try the park again?" he asked. Isaiah looked at him, surprised, then smiled. They packed a small lunch, grabbed a soccer ball, and walked together to Washington Green. The swings were quiet that day. The camera signs were up now, posted on tall poles. A group of parents, ones who had been there that afternoon, were chatting near the benches. A volunteer in a Parks Department shirt made rounds with a clipboard. Noah walked slowly at first, eyes scanning the playground. Then, without a word, he ran forward, sneakers kicking up gravel, and climbed onto the swing. He started slow, one push, then another, and then he laughed. Isaiah stood watching him, hands in his pockets, a breath finally leaving his chest that he didn't know he'd been holding. That swing, once the sight of fear, had become something else again. Not forgotten, not erased, but reclaimed. Sometimes, justice didn't look like a courtroom. Sometimes, it looked like a child on a swing. Unafraid. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.